There exists a psychological phenomenon so profound that Carl Gustav Jung considered it one of humanity's most significant yet overlooked transitions, a complete reversal of everything the human psyche has prioritized for decades. And it happens to 90% of people who reach their 60th year without them even realizing what's occurring. Imagine spending decades building what you believed was the perfect life, checking every box society handed you, achieving everything you were told would bring happiness, only to discover at age 60 that your soul has been silently suffocating beneath layers of expectations, masks, and compromises you never consciously agreed to make. This isn't about failure or dissatisfaction with external circumstances. This is about a profound psychological awakening that Jung discovered happens when the deeper layers of human consciousness finally demand their voice be heard. Jung's groundbreaking research revealed that human existence operates through two radically different psychological phases, and the transition between them represents the most critical juncture in psychological development. The first phase spans approximately 4 decades. During this time, we construct what Jung called the ego fortress. We build our social identity, we chase external validation, we accumulate status symbols, we follow society's prescribed pathways to success. But then something extraordinary happens around age 60, something that fundamentally challenges everything we thought we knew about human nature. The psyche initiates what Jung termed a complete psychological rebellion. The soul begins systematically rejecting everything artificial, everything forced, everything that served merely as survival camouflage. The psychological landscape changes so dramatically that many individuals feel as though they've awakened in a foreign land, surrounded by goals that no longer inspire them, relationships that feel hollow, and achievements that suddenly seem meaningless. This isn't depression or midlife crisis. This is the psyche demanding authenticity. Jung explained that while the first half of life focuses on adaptation to the external world, the second half requires integration of the internal world. The unconscious content that was suppressed during the ego-building years now demands recognition. The shadow, as Jung called these rejected aspects of ourselves, begins to surface not as something destructive, but as parts of our authentic self that were sacrificed for social acceptance. Consider how many people spend decades performing roles that never truly fit, pursuing careers that satisfy others' expectations, maintaining relationships based on duty rather than genuine connection. By age 60, the psyche grows weary of this performance. It begins to strip away the masks, one by one. Jung observed that this process often creates what appears to be a personality crisis, but it's actually the beginning of psychological wholeness. The individual starts questioning fundamental assumptions about success, happiness, and purpose. What once seemed important now feels trivial. What once brought pride now feels burdensome. This transformation manifests differently for each person. Some suddenly desire to learn new skills. Others feel compelled to end toxic relationships. Many experience an unprecedented urge for solitude and reflection. The common thread is a rejection of external validation in favor of internal truth. Jung referred to this as the movement from persona to authentic self, the persona being the mask we wear for social acceptance, while the authentic self represents our genuine nature. This shift often disturbs family members and friends who expect consistency. They may interpret these changes as selfishness or instability, but Jung understood it as the natural progression toward psychological maturity. The soul at 60 demands honesty about what truly matters. It refuses to waste precious time on superficial pursuits. Many individuals discover that their deepest satisfaction comes not from achieving more, but from being more authentic. Jung noticed that this phase brings unprecedented clarity about relationships. People naturally gravitate toward those who accept their authentic selves, while distancing themselves from those who prefer their old personas. This isn't rejection of others. It's recognition that genuine connection requires authenticity from both parties. The transformation also affects one's relationship with time itself. Urgency shifts from external pressures to internal calling. Deadlines matter less than depth. Quantity gives way to quality. If you're finding value in this exploration of Jung's insights, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell. We dive deep into psychological concepts that can transform your understanding of human nature, and you'll find additional resources in the description below that expand on these themes. Jung observed that this 60-year transition often awakens what he called the transcendent function, the ability to bridge conscious and unconscious content in service of psychological wholeness. Dreams become more vivid and meaningful, intuition strengthens, and individuals often report feeling more connected to something greater than themselves. This isn't necessarily religious awakening, though. It can be. It's psychological awakening to the deeper dimensions of existence. The conventional markers of success begin to feel empty because the soul seeks meaning rather than achievement. Jung documented cases of highly successful individuals who experienced profound dissatisfaction despite having everything society deemed valuable. Their psyches were signaling that external accumulation couldn't satisfy the soul's hunger for authentic expression. This explains why many people at this age feel drawn to creative pursuits they abandoned. In youth, they're responding to the soul's demand for genuine self-expression. The creative impulse represents the authentic self-seeking manifestation in the world. Jung also noted that this phase often brings reconciliation with mortality, not as morbid preoccupation, but as acceptance that transforms how one approaches each remaining day. When the inevitability of death becomes real, the trivial naturally falls away, leaving space for what genuinely matters. This awareness paradoxically brings vitality, not despair, because it clarifies priorities with unprecedented precision. Many report feeling more alive at 60 than they did in their 30s, despite physical changes, because they're finally living from their authentic center. The transformation Jung described also involves what he termed individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who others expect you to be. This requires courage because it often means disappointing people who benefited from your old patterns. Yet Jung found that those who embrace this transformation discover reserves of strength they never knew they possessed. The soul's wisdom emerges when we stop forcing ourselves into ill-fitting molds. Jung's research revealed that cultures throughout history have recognized this life transition, though modern society often overlooks its significance. Ancient wisdom traditions speak of the elder phase as a time of spiritual authority, when individuals transcend ego concerns and offer guidance rooted in authentic wisdom. This wisdom doesn't come from books or theories. It emerges from integrating a lifetime of experiences, both painful and joyful, into coherent understanding. Jung observed that those who successfully navigate this transition become sources of genuine wisdom, not because they have all the answers, but because they've learned to live with uncertainty while maintaining inner peace. They've discovered that wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means accepting all aspects of yourself, including the parts you once rejected. This acceptance creates a foundation for authentic relationships and meaningful contribution to the world. The 60-year transformation Jung described isn't automatic. It requires conscious participation. Many resist this process because it demands releasing identities and achievements that once provided security. But Jung found that resistance only prolongs suffering, while acceptance opens doorways to forms of fulfillment that younger years couldn't provide. The soul's awakening at 60 represents not an ending, but a beginning, the commencement of the most authentic phase of existence. In our next exploration, we'll discover how this transformation manifests in daily life, the specific changes individuals experience as they align with their authentic nature, and the profound impact this shift has on relationships, creativity, and spiritual awareness. We'll examine Jung's observations about how the psyche reorganizes itself during this phase, and what this means for finding genuine purpose in the later decades of life. This transformation manifests in ways that often surprise even those experiencing it. The changes emerge quietly in daily routines, in sudden shifts of preference, in inexplicable feelings of distance from familiar environments. One morning you wake up and certain clothes feel wrong against your skin, not physically uncomfortable, but psychologically misaligned, as if they belong to someone you no longer recognize as yourself. Conversations that once energized you now feel hollow, draining, superficial, while silence becomes a refuge rather than an absence to be filled. Jung observed that this inner revolution operates through what he called the invisible transformation, a restructuring of the psyche that happens beneath conscious awareness until it reaches a tipping point. The soul begins asking questions that have nothing to do with productivity or achievement. What still moves me beyond social expectations? What part of my authentic nature remains untouched by others' projections? What would I choose if I no longer needed anyone's approval? These aren't intellectual exercises. They're psychological, imperatives emerging from the deepest layers of consciousness. Jung discovered that this questioning phase serves a crucial function. It creates space for what he termed shadow integration, the reclaiming of aspects of personality that were suppressed during the ego-building decades. The shadow in Jungian psychology isn't evil or destructive. It's simply the collection of traits, desires, and potentials that were deemed unacceptable by family, society, or personal survival strategies. At 60, these rejected parts begin surfacing not as problems to be solved, but as gifts to be unwrapped. The creative impulse is abandoned for practical career choices, the emotional sensitivity suppressed for professional credibility, the intuitive wisdom dismissed for rational thinking. All these facets of authentic self-return, demanding integration. Jung noted that many individuals experience sudden urges, during this phase, desires to learn skills they'd always wanted to master, compulsions to end relationships that drain rather than nourish, overwhelming needs for solitude and reflection. These aren't whims or midlife rebellions. They're the psyche's attempt to achieve what Jung called wholeness, the integration of all aspects of personality into a coherent, authentic identity. This process often disturbs family members and friends who've grown comfortable with your predictable patterns. They may interpret your changes as selfishness or instability, not understanding that you're finally becoming who you've always been beneath the social conditioning. Jung emphasized that this resistance from others is natural. Your authentic emergence threatens their own psychological defenses, reminds them of their own unexplored potentials, challenges their assumptions about who you should be. But the soul at 60 possesses a quality it lacked in earlier decades, the strength to disappoint others in service of personal truth. This isn't cruelty, it's psychological necessity. The recognition that living authentically requires releasing the need for universal approval. Women especially, Jung observed, tend to flourish during this transformation, after decades of accommodating others' needs, minimizing their own power, seeking permission to exist fully. They begin claiming psychological territory that was always rightfully theirs. They stop apologizing for their strength, stop softening their opinions to avoid conflict, stop asking others to validate their choices. The beauty that emerges from this authentic claiming has nothing to do with physical appearance. It's the radiance of a soul finally allowed to breathe without constraint. Jung documented that this beauty often unsettles those still trapped in superficial existence. It's too real, too quiet, too grounded in inner truth rather than external validation. Men experience this transformation differently but equally profoundly. The competitive drives that once defined their identity begin feeling meaningless. The need to dominate, control, or prove superiority dissolves into a desire for genuine connection and inner peace. Jung observed that this phase brings profound shifts in how individuals relate to time itself. Urgency transforms from external pressure to internal calling. Quantity gives way to quality. Accomplishment becomes less important than presence. Days are no longer measured by tasks completed, but by moments fully experienced. The depth of a sunset, the quality of silence, the truth contained in a simple gesture. Love also undergoes complete transformation during this psychological evolution. It stops being about completion, fantasy, or expectation, and becomes conscious. Choice. You no longer love someone to fill an inner void. You love to accompany another soul on their journey. Love becomes shared presence rather than possessive attachment, understanding rather than demand. Fear loses its paralyzing grip during this phase, not because life becomes easier, but because the soul has survived enough challenges to trust its own resilience. Jung noted that individuals at this stage possess hard-earned wisdom that can't be taught in books, clarity born from scars, knowing that lives in the body rather than the mind. This embodied wisdom often disturbs younger people still operating from ego-driven consciousness. They mistake the calm confidence of integrated souls for arrogance or detachment, not recognizing the profound strength required to achieve such inner peace. Jung identified this as the phase where what he called the transcendent function becomes active, the ability to bridge conscious and unconscious material in service of psychological wholeness. Dreams become more vivid and meaningful. Intuitive insights increase dramatically. Individuals report feeling more connected to something greater than their personal identity. This isn't necessarily religious awakening, though it can manifest that way. It's psychological awakening to the deeper dimensions of human existence. Many discover spirituality for the first time during this phase, not as doctrine or belief system, but as lived experience of interconnectedness, presence, and meaning beyond material concerns. Jung emphasized that this spiritual awakening emerges naturally when the ego stops dominating consciousness, allowing deeper layers of awareness to surface. The conventional markers of success that once provided identity begin feeling empty because the soul hungers for meaning rather than achievement, depth rather than breadth, being rather than having. Jung documented cases of highly accomplished individuals who experienced profound dissatisfaction despite external success, their psyches signaling that accumulation couldn't satisfy the soul's demand for authentic expression. This explains why so many people during this phase feel drawn to creative pursuits they'd abandoned in youth. Writing, painting, music, gardening, craftsmanship, any activity that allows the authentic self to manifest in the world. The creative impulse represents the soul's desire for expression, not for others' approval, but for its own fulfillment, the joy of bringing inner reality into external form. Jung also observed that this transformation involves what he called psychological death and rebirth. Old identities, roles, and self-concepts must die for authentic selfhood to emerge. At 60, many psychological structures require dissolution. The need for approval dies. The illusion of control dissolves. The habit of rescuing others fades. The pressure to be perfect releases. When these psychological patterns die, extraordinary space opens within consciousness, like clearing decades of accumulated debris from a house. Suddenly there's room to breathe, move, exist without constraint. This liberation manifests as renewed creativity, deeper relationships, profound inner peace, and what Jung called conscious suffering, the ability to experience pain without being destroyed by it. Jung distinguished between neurotic suffering, which serves no purpose except to maintain familiar patterns, and conscious suffering, which transforms consciousness and deepens wisdom. The individual at 60 has typically experienced enough conscious suffering to develop what Jung called psychological immunity, resilience born from surviving and integrating life's inevitable challenges. This isn't hardness or emotional numbness. It's refined sensitivity combined with inner stability. The capacity to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, to care profoundly without being destroyed by loss. Jung observed that this combination of sensitivity and strength creates ideal conditions for what he termed late individuation, the process of becoming fully who you were meant to be. Unlike earlier life phases focused on adaptation to external requirements, late individuation prioritizes alignment with inner truth, authentic self-expression, and psychological wholeness. This process reveals itself through small but significant changes: preferences for solitude over social obligations, attraction to depth over superficiality, gravitating toward people who appreciate rather than try to change you. Jung noted that relationships naturally transform during this phase. You drift away from energy drains and move toward soul nourishments, not through conscious decision but through organic psychological attraction. When you no longer need others to complete your identity, you can enjoy their company without desperation, love without possessiveness, connect without losing yourself. This represents true psychological freedom, the ability to be fully present with others while maintaining complete self-possession, to give generously without depleting yourself, to receive gratefully without obligation. Jung considered this the highest achievement of human psychological development, the integration of all aspects of personality into a coherent, authentic whole that serves both individual fulfillment and collective welfare. The soul at 60 no longer needs to conquer the world. It seeks peace within its own being, no longer demands final answers. It embraces mystery, no longer craves speed, it treasures depth. This shift from having to being represents the culmination of Jung's vision of human development, the recognition that life's ultimate purpose isn't accumulation, but realization, not achievement, but authenticity, not success, but wholeness. Those who embrace this transformation discover something remarkable: the peace of being themselves without apology, the joy of existence without justification, the freedom of authenticity without fear. Jung saw this as the most sacred phase of human existence because it represents the soul's return to its essential nature, stripped of all that is false, adorned only with what is true. In this return, individuals often discover that everything they thought they'd lost was actually being preserved, waiting for the moment when they had sufficient courage and wisdom to reclaim it. The dreams deferred, the talents suppressed, the love withheld, all return not as regrets but as possibilities, not as punishment but as gifts. This is why Jung considered 60 not the beginning of decline, but the commencement of the most authentic phase of human existence, when the soul finally receives permission to express its true nature without constraint. Those who hear this calling and respond with courage discover that what seemed like an ending was actually the beginning of their real life, deeper, truer, more beautiful than anything that came before.